Hello, I'm Hugh Lunn. Welcome to the Frew Park YouTube channel. A lot of people in Australia have forgotten about Frank Sedgman, who was such a famous Australian tennis player that he was one of the most famous men in the world at the start of the 50s. Because if you look back at all the records, you'll see that the last man to win all three Wimbledon doubles titles... The last man to win all three Wimbledon titles in the one year, in 1952, was Frank Sedgman. He was also the first Australian to win the US Open. And he said he always feared coming up to Milton to play because some of those Queenslanders, they were so hard to beat.
So we're back again, ladies and gentlemen, with Frank. And Hugh Lunn, when he sent me the email in relation to Frank, said that he was one of the most successful, well-known individuals in the world, not Australia, just in the world, Hugh said, in those early 50s. And it was because of your decision to go from the amateur ranks to the professional ranks, because you were one of the very first, if not the first, in Australia to actually make that decision. And there's a connection to Frew Park because Big Bill Edwards, who was the president of the Lawn Tennis Association in Queensland, I think would have taken somewhat of a dim view of that. And as the story evolves, it'll become apparent in later YouTubes. So, Frank, could you just tell us what your memory were of that?
Yes, well, I turned professional with Jack Kramer as a promoter. I played him a lot of matches in America, but then we came to Australia to play with him.
Yep.
And he was the promoter, and he made a deal with Big Bill Edwards, and he was very receptive at the start. But you know, we played at Milton. We got pretty good crowds, and that was the first year. Then another year we came back and I played with Pancho Gonzalez, and his mood changed a bit because he felt he was losing control of the amateur game in Australia, and he was also in Queensland. And
which was parochial at the best of times.
Yes, and then he barred us from playing at Milton. And
so what year would that be?
That'll be 54.
Okay, yeah.
And he had a secretary called Alf Shave, who was a tennis writer for the Courier Mail there. And Alf Shave was a delegate for Australia at the International Federation. And Jack Kramer was very keen on trying to make open tennis because there were two factions, you know, there was the amateurs running the game and there was us professionals. And the amateur game was falling off quite significantly. You know, the Davis Cup wasn't getting the crowds, or the Australian Championships weren't getting the crowds. And Kramer felt that if we could bring in open tennis and make it legally to play for prize money, the game would go ahead. But see, in those days, a lot of the amateurs, even like Roy Emerson and Rod Laver, they were getting paid under the table as amateurs. And it was sort of, they were sort of professionals anyway, but anyway, the Big Bill opposed it all. But Alf Shave, he went over to London for a tournament, for a meeting, and they were going to really vote on whether professional tennis came in. And Jack Kramer had been doing all the lobbying with all the different nations around the place, who the delegates were, and who was going to vote for open tennis. And Alf Shave said he was going to vote for open tennis as Australian's delegate. And anyway, from Queensland. And we thought, oh good, this is good, we're going to get open tennis. And then everybody could play, you know, on one level. And anyway, they had a meeting and it got defeated. So the old system was where amateurs and professionals were miles apart.
Yeah.
And then it took them about another till 1968 to bring in open tennis. And then when they did bring in open tennis, it just showed that tennis needed it because
Crowds
crowds
went through the roof.
increased, went through the roof. And but in the meantime, all this time the tennis was played at Frew Park, or Milton as we call it, and they had some Australian championships there, some of which Rod Laver won and Roy Anderson won. And it was sad to see though that tennis really dropped off later on when Milton fell into disrepair, and people didn't like to go there because of the way the state of the stands were.
Plenty of splinters.
Plenty of splinters, you're right. Anyway, that's the way I sort of saw the way that the tennis declined in Queensland.
Yep, yeah, I think you're exactly right there. With that, we might just end this particular part of the YouTube.
Hi, I'm Billy Lunn, and I hope you are enjoying these YouTube videos of the Great Milton Tennis Centre.